I've completed the draft of a book, and hopefully it will be in press without too many more passing months, or be in print. And I'm excited about this because and really it's written to try to explain, and you will see a lot of reference to Feldenkrais strategies. I commonly don't refer to them as Feldenkrais strategies, but it will be very familiar to you. I want you to know that I am strongly influenced. Or put it another way, my evolution of my own thinking about this is very consistent with how you think about things. I have almost no conflicts, right? It's the difference between thinking about recovering movement or recovering anything by pounding on it in a stereotypic way, is thinking I have to get the person to be able to go from here to here, right? To think about that's what the goal is. The goal is much more interesting than that. And it's more about, it's more about actually using a body and using variety to get there in all kinds of natural exploratory ways. I mean, that's really what it's about. And so this is expressed complexly and elaborately in this book. I hope in an understandable way to the average citizen. And I've also have written basically a second book, because what I've done is written a book that I hope an informed layperson can read. And then I've written, on a website, I've written a sort of annotated volume in which I don't have the text in the same elaborate way, but I have arguments about where or explanations about where the arguments come from. And there I do refer quite a bit to things like Feldenkrais practices. Because I think that I do want to keep people to understand that this is a place where they can get help. One of the lessons of this research is that stereotypy is the enemy, and that you really want to exercise the brain with a variety of movement, with a variety of action, with a variety of challenge that are presented to the brain. And this is one of the principles that comes down from this line of thought, from the understanding that the feelings, the thoughts about movement are inseparable from the movement itself. But it's better to try to move to a point in space if you are trying to achieve some movement control at 100 different speeds or in 100 different ways to get to the point in space than to move, that 200 ways in exactly the same way, I mean, richer. To basically try to perform that operation in all of these elaborations. And we're trying increasingly to build this into all of the cognitive training and exercises that we do. Because we know that that's really what the brain wants. What the brain wants is to be able to set up the conditions by which, in a sense, it can solve the task on almost any circumstance, in almost any moment. From one point of view, the brain learns the rule. It learns what the relationships are. You could say the factors that apply to relate to performing the correct behavior under any circumstance, getting the right answer under any circumstance. But the other part of it is that the brain is learning more facilely to get there, you could say, from any direction. Mm-hmm. And that's really what you want. That represents an aspect of brain power. It's to be able to get there from all kinds of directions. And in a sense, that's the essence of how you grow a brain that's imaginative. Or the way I commonly describe it to people is that when you get older, it's common that an older individual will stereotype their movement. And as a consequence of stereotyping, let's say they're walking, they're actually less safe. Because of course, safety in walking has to do with dealing with the surprise. And the surprise can come in all kinds of forms and all kinds of directions. And the only way you can really deal with a surprise that comes from any direction, basically, is to walk with substantial variability. And the same with thought. The same in your operations in general. You basically want to enrich them, elaborate them, because basically that contributes to your not straight-lacing yourself in the point of view of how you're operating in thought, just like how you're operating in the control of your physical actions. So in a sense, the richer, the more variably you can move across these landscapes, the more powerful you are, and the more imaginative you are, and the more fun you're having. Another thing that we're always trying to control is to try to focus the attention, you could say, on and to have people really think about, in a sense, feel themselves in the action. In that case, commonly it's a cognitive action. But we're trying to control that. We're trying to basically engage the individual in the task at hand in some relatively direct and controlled way. And we know from a rich variety of experiments, my phrase for it is, the brain only changes in a sense when it matters to it. And matters to it means it has to be engaged in a task. In a sense, it has to understand what it's up to, and it has to matter to it. And what that's really reflecting is the fact that under the right contingent conditions, it's releasing the neuromodulators that are actually controlling the brain change. And of course, it would not be so foolish or wasteful as to permit change when it has not itself determined that it's going to matter to it, that in a sense that it's going to benefit it. Witnessing the progression of change is a critical part of improvement. There are also really nice studies on motivation that have shown that when you believe that it's possible to change, when you actually believe, and this is something that in your instructive methods you emphasize, you can basically, you are witnessing the change, and in a sense you're conferring and reassuring that to the individual that's in action with you. And so quite rapidly, the person understands that they have the capacity to change. I mean, they begin to feel it, they begin to sense it, right? And that's a critical aspect of it. It's a critical part of, and when we talk about motivation and contributing to change, we're really talking about neurology. We're really talking about things changing in the brain that condition the brain basically to change. And it's been shown that this is a critical and important dimension of it, that you can have people be unaware of the possibility of change or aware of it, and the more in a sense they're aware of it and aware of the fact that they have the real potential to be different tomorrow as compared to today, the more they believe that, the more they understand that that's real, actually the more they change. This is another thing I like about what you do, because you understand that when you witness movement, commonly the movement is distorted or incomplete. Now, what I understand from my science to some extent is where that does come from. And another way to put it is that commonly, well, first of all, you can drive change, of course, in all kinds of directions that are less than ideal. And they can be developed in an individual as habits. That can occur, of course, in the domain of thought. It can occur in the domain of action. So that when you look at someone in front of you, you can look at a person whose movements are very constrained or are very limited or are very distorted. It might be as a consequence of something pathological that's happened to them or with them, but it might just come out of, in a sense, a progression of habits that ultimately have led them in a not very productive or not very useful direction. So that the understanding that every movement, every place you get is not necessarily the best platform for the next movement or recovery, but understand in some more fundamental sense, you have to recover to a more elemental position to get past this class of distortion that's so limiting to a person. And this is something I think that you have a better perspective about than do most people that are involved in movement therapy, because in a sense you accept and deal with those distortions by exploring the possibility of correction and emphasizing the fact that you have to think about movement maybe in a way they haven't thought about it, more completely in a more unified way that involves, more generously involves the more natural aspects of movement, power, movement control. So I really like that about what you guys do. I mean, there was wisdom involved in the genesis of these basic ideas from Feldenkrais and from the other early progenitors of this approach.